Hi, I'm Buntle. I'm the ADHD consultant, and this is my series where I talk about all of the things that people have asked me over my consulting career about consulting, especially if you are ADHD as I am. Today, we're talking about a very neurodivergent specific topic, although I think it's probably helpful to anyone who struggles with their emotions, bouncing back from emotional dysregulation a little faster. Now, for those of you who don't know, emotional dysregulation is basically struggling to manage your emotions or manage the behaviors associated with your emotions or kind of knowing what to do with them. It can manifest in many different ways. For example, being unable to make decisions because you're just so overwhelmed with fear, anxiety, anger, whatever it might be. It might show up as a stomach ache, as it does for me a lot of the time. It could show up as being very snappy with other people or being very short with other people. It could show up as not really being able to tell the emotions of others or what they're feeling. There are a lot of different ways. Google it, read up about it, whatever. But the point is that especially if you have a high pressure job, it's really important to be able to bounce back from that quickly because you don't have the luxury of time and don't have the luxury of kind of just like ruminating, marinating in those feelings of like sadness and self-loathing. You kind of have to keep it going. And so I had to learn some strategies to figure out emotional dysregulation in the context of a consultant very quickly. And these are the things that I did. The first is really being able to know how it feels in your body so that you can identify it when it actually happens. Sometimes just being able to name the thing takes some of its power away. I had a situation where I get these really intense stomach aches and I start to feel really sick. And I thought it was because I, had a macaroni or I'd, had a pizza, something of those things. And that was obviously not the case because it would have happened every time I had a macaroni cheese or a pizza or whatever. And it didn't. And trying to get to when my stomach hurts, it's actually my body telling me I'm stressed out, actually really helped. Because as soon as I could go, oh, I'm stressed out, I can go, okay, what things can I do to resolve being stressed out? Do I go for a walk? Should I do some Pilates? Should I call a friend? But at least they then become coping mechanisms. If you don't know what's happening to you and you can't recognize the difference between happiness and sadness in your body or shame or anger in your body, that's a different challenge altogether. And it's incredibly difficult for people who are neurodivergent to do it. But at least for some of these frequently occurring things, especially things that happen at work, I would encourage you to spend the time trying to think about what it is and write that stuff down because you're not going to remember it. You're 1000, it's not going to happen. That's not how our ADHD brains work. So write it down, put it on a Post-it on your laptop, in the address book or the notebook that you pretend that you're going to read ever again, like next to your mirror, whatever it might be, but just something that reminds you to go like, how am I feeling right now? What do I want to do about that, right? To give you a little bit more of a sense of control and intentionality about how you deal with your emotions. There's also the question about that I always ask myself and that I talk to my coaching clients about, which is like, ask yourself, is this true? So sometimes we play these games where we tell ourselves a story about the situation that's happening to us or the situation that we are causing that has resulted in an outcome that we don't like. For example, I may have said something in a problem-solving session with the internal team, and after I said it, nobody responded to it, and the next person spoke, and then everyone spoke about the next person's point, right? The story I could tell myself in my head is like, oh my God, they all think I'm an idiot. They think I'm so silly. And like, why would I say that in front of them? And I really should have thought that through more. And, the spiral continues. The real question is any of that actually true though, right? Because if I think about what happens when other people speak up in meetings and say things which are not smart, usually everybody kind of goes, wasn't the best, but they kind of carry on, right? Like nobody reflects on that for a really long time. Nobody is thinking about that 2 hours later. If you had to think about every not smart thing people have said in meetings that you've been in, you probably remember that it wasn't like the brightest, but you don't remember specifically what they said. And in most cases, unless it was happening every day, you don't think any less of the person for having views that were like a little bit not light bulb moments. So ask yourself, is this true in any of those situations? I think it's also very helpful if you, like me, suffer from rejection sensitivity dysphoria. which is essentially your feelings of rejection are way overblown from what they should be, like to an irrational level. So your friends, friendship group, and two of the people in the group of 20 go for a coffee by themselves, and you suddenly think, they're not my friends anymore, they must hate me, right? Like, that's an overblown example, but something which I can imagine happened to me, right? Like, if someone doesn't call me after a date, even though I objectively wanted nothing to do with them, the fact that they didn't call me makes me feel incredibly rejected and like sad, and I can't really, there's no rational reason for it. I get that there's no reason to feel that way, but then I suddenly feel like, oh no, I'll never be loved, it's so whatever. And so for me, it's very helpful to be able to play the is this true game with my RSD, because it puts me back in reality and out of the story that I'm telling myself, or at least gives me some facts that I can, then continue to explore things. Because if the answer is, yes, it's true, everyone will think I'm an idiot, let's go to the next step, which is playing the worst case scenario game. Because, okay, let's play this through, right? You speak up at the meeting. Nobody likes what you have to say. Everybody thinks you're a bit silly. Cool, then what? Is it the case that they're going to stop speaking to you? Cool, then what? Then they can't do any work and they'd have to speak to you eventually because otherwise they can't get the project done. Okay, cool. Maybe they're just really jerks and they take you off the project. Awesome, then what? You'll get onto another project. Oh, maybe no one wants to staff you in any other projects. Awesome, then what? Then you'll have 6 months to figure it out before up or out kicks in. All right, in that 6-month period, you're not going to do anything to change their mind about how they felt in that one meeting? Sure, let's go with that. Cool, that 6 months but hits and they say, you haven't improved at all since that one time in that one meeting that you made a 30-second comment that was not particularly smart. Then what? They fire you. Okay, what are you going to do? Get a new job? Cool, right? You still have the experience of having been a consultant. The wonderful thing about consulting, which often actually scares me a bit, is that because all your work is confidential, it's not like anyone would know that that incident had even happened, right? Because you can't really talk about your client experiences. And you can just choose not to mention that ever again, which most people do, and which also doesn't qualify as a lie because no one's asking you in an interview, tell me about all the times that you messed up in a meeting and felt, a bit silly. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So when you really play the worst case scenario game, and here I'm not being intentionally overboard, I really am going, what is the worst possible thing that could happen? For most things, and for me, 99% of things that ever happen in any work-related context, the outcome is not so bad, if you're a consultant anyway, that it warrants the kind of fear that you have about it and that it warrants you getting dysregulated. And so just being able to play that game and realize, what's the worst that happens? At some point when I had just moved to the UK, I was trying to think about what happened if I lost a consulting job and went, okay, I'll be deported and lose my house and have to go back to South Africa. And then I was like, but South Africa is kind of lovely. Okay, I have to go move in with my mom. She buys toiletries. She makes all my meals. She doesn't let me do any laundry. I can take my dog with me, hang out in sunny South Africa and not have to be in the UK where it rains all the time. If that's my worst case scenario, that's a pretty good worst case scenario, right? So definitely play that game for yourself. I think what also helps that game to work is having an identity and a life that's outside work. Because if you can take whatever happens to you at work, which often in a consulting situation, by the way, is very dramatic because the highs are very high and the lows are very low. Everything is urgent. Everything is the worst possible thing that could happen. Everything is something you need to deal with immediately, or 7,000 people are going to get fired. That's what it feels like. And being able to have an identity outside work where you are not defining yourself, not defining your success, not defining what makes you a good person based on what you do for money is always going to be a great thing. And I experienced that very early in my consulting career because every time someone would say something awesome about my work, I'd be up here super excited. Yes, this is the most amazing job ever. But then 3 days later, when they were like, oh, why did you do this, this, and this? That made no sense. I was suddenly all the way back down here and then really struggled to get back on my game. And that kind of threw me for sometimes the rest of the project, to be honest. And what I realized is that I cannot judge or measure myself and my own capabilities on the basis of what happened on the project, right? Or what happened that day, or what happened in that meeting. I have to have some other criterion that I'm using to establish whether I'm doing a good job with my life. Because if I do it based on these people, this situation, this job, I will lose it and I will lose myself. And so at the time, I was trying to work out like what would make me happy every day to achieve. What is something that I can control, that I can choose to do or not do, that will objectively make me feel like, okay, you did a good job today, Wednesday, like good job. And mine at the time was kindness. I really felt like in a lot of consulting companies and a lot of companies in general, if you are smart enough, if you are useful enough, you don't really have to be kind. You don't have to be nice. You can kind of just get stuff done, and people accept really that you're going to do it in a way that's like not so nice. I think that's changing a lot, thank goodness, because Gen Z will save us all as far as I'm concerned. But I do think that that is still very predominant, especially the more senior you go, where we are yet to see people in our kind of age demographic breaking through into those super senior C-suite roles. And it's also going to be something if you work in pharmaceuticals, insurance, banking, especially investment, private banking, those kind of belief systems are very rife in those industries still. So I decided that being kind was something that I could control, and also something that I feel proud of because it wasn't something that everyone was doing. And that's what I tried to do. And so, being kind is not the same as being nice, I should point out. And so I definitely approached it with the kind of radical candor idea of what you should be doing is telling people what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. And that is the kindest thing to do. And I encourage everybody to do that. I had one coachee who was working at McKinsey, and he had roughly the same problem where it was just kind of such emotional dysregulation because of the stuff that was happening at work. And so I said to him, well, what is it that you want to keep doing? And he said, well, I love learning. I love learning on the job. I love learning from people, but I'm really not adding any value doing that. And so I feel like I need to work more. And I was a bit like, dude, yeah, okay, you need to add value, but you can't base your whole identity on adding value. You can, however, base who you want to be on learning, because if you have learned some stuff that day, it's a good day, regardless of what happened. And it also means that you can learn new and different things and use those to feed your life, right? Like learn photography, take up scuba diving, whatever it might be, because that's consistent with your identity and who you want to be in and outside of work. So you definitely need to work on having an identity outside of work. I find that helps massively. So is talking about it with your support network, not with randoms. I say this because, especially if it's emotional dysregulation as a result of your neurodiversity, it's really difficult to talk to random people about it, because they might say, oh, just don't be so emotional. Oh, have you tried not feeling that way? All of these things, which is like not super helpful if your brain just works a different way, and you're being irrational, you're overreacting, but you can't help it. It's what your brain's gonna brain. So talking about it with your support network and people who know you, who understand how your neurodiversity manifests, who understand what emotional dysregulation and rejection sensitivity dysphoria might look like, that's going to be super helpful. In addition to having sponsors who will give you the benefit of the doubt when you mess up, like truly mess up, and you're going to mess up. Even when I was arguably doing very well and had a really good track record for myself built up, I remember doing one project with a junior partner who just hated me, and I got sick and refused to work while I was sick, and he hated that. And it was like a whole thing. And I didn't really care. I was like, this dude's from the Paris office. I'm not even in that office. Like, it doesn't really matter. But of course, he was my manager on the project, so he was obviously going to feed that back to other people. And I remember being at the airport on the way home and like texting my sponsors being like, this project went really badly. Like, he was not happy with me. Like, the team liked me, the client liked me, but this guy did not. He's going to tank my next review, like whatever it might be. And just having all of my sponsors be like, it's fine, it never happened. And immediately put me on a project with people who I loved and worked with all the time, so that I had a different viewpoint for that review, so that even if it wasn't like glowing from the French EM or the French AP or whatever, still I could have a good enough review to not trigger a kind of up or out process, because my sponsors had my back. And I'll talk a lot about sponsorship at a different stage, because I think having a coach is cool, definitely do that. Pay for it if you can, or get your company to pay for it. Having a mentor, also interesting, because you'll hear a lot of their stories and whatever. And I guess it's kind of like me talking about my personal experiences, and you can take from it and not take from it whatever advice you want. But neither of those things are going to get you a promotion, right? Like, neither of those things are actually going to get someone who will have skin in the game and who will be willing to put their own reputation on the line to advocate for you and to give you experiences and exposure. People who do that are sponsors, and that will help you massively, because if you know those people have your back, you can't be sponsored by a fellow associate or a consultant, right? Like, that's not happening. It has to be partners, directors, whatever. And having them in your corner is absolutely going to help with you working out your emotional dysregulation, especially when you've made a mistake or you feel like you've earned it in some way. That's going to be very helpful to give you the peace of mind that it's not all over because of that one thing. And lastly, this is actually my favorite one. I take an emotional reset nap. Like, I would go to my car and just like take a 15-minute nap in my car, set an alarm. When I woke up, I always felt a little bit better, because maybe it was because most of the time I was pretty sleep deprived as a consultant, but I suspect that there is also something that's just really like healing about a nap and kind of draws a line. Like, that was pre-nap. This is the post-nap world. This is the new normal post-nap world. And that really helped me create some emotional distance from what I'd been feeling before the nap. If it was something that still was bothering me after the nap, then I could go, maybe this isn't dysregulation. Maybe this is actually a serious challenge or a concern that I have that I need to investigate and look at more carefully than just, assuming that my brain is just braining. And that always helps, to be honest. And sometimes I just go like, I'm really upset about the situation. I'm not going to deal with it until the morning, because sleep on it is exactly what I want to do. I'm going to sleep on it and hopefully crush it in my sleep. And if it's still there in the morning, well, I guess we're going to have some breakfast and talk about it. So these are the things that I do to bounce back from emotional dysregulation a little bit faster, and things that really helped me when I was at the firm. I hope that they can help you. And I think the so what of all of this is honestly, like, be kind to yourself. Your brain is going to do what your brain does. Whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, you have feelings, you're still a human being. So like, be a little bit kinder to yourself about that, and give yourself time to recover, even if it's not right then in the moment, etc. On the weekend, in the evenings, you need time to process, you need time to deal with your feelings, because spoiler alert, they will always come back to hurt you. You think they won't, but they will. And I can tell you some stories about how my body and my mind have collaborated essentially to mess me up just because I refuse to deal with my feelings. So be kind to yourself and others, I think. And that's all for today. Thanks so much. I'll see you soon. Bye.